You were personally attacked by the occupant in the White House, Dr. Salaam, and 16% of black men with a college degree voted for Trump in 2016. I have black men who call into my show. I'm on air 2 hours a day, 5 days a week, who are talking about supporting Trump, and they're saying there's some inroads among black men on Trump's team. What do you say to black men out there, black voters, who don't see Trump or his team as a threat to them, to us?
I'm glad you asked me that. I will turn your attention to page 56 of our book, Clone. When you read Clone, you get a real sense of understanding what the education system is about, and as it is beginning to shape your worldview in order to conform to the oppression or what you see around you. Clone. Ever since that day in the 5th grade, my teachers watched me so hard, so close, that I felt like I was trying to break out of prison, even though I was just in school. Every dumb thing I did, they thought was because of trouble at home, an absent father, a tired mother, not enough books, not enough vegetables, not enough sleep. They believed those lies about me and made themselves a whole nother boy in their minds and replaced me with him. I wanted to share that as the world begins to get the opportunity to read our work, because we're talking about not now, we're talking about in everyone's past. There was a time and opportunity where we look at what is the complexion for acceptance, and we look at what is the complexion for rejection. And we make up our minds in that it is far better to have the complexion for acceptance than for you to have the complexion for rejection. But what happens if you're born in this skin? What do you then do? And I think that when we look at the wording that Donald Trump has put out there in the world, what do you have to lose? We're at war. We are being oppressed. We are being murdered in the streets. There was a saying on NPR in New York, I never forget. It said, "Me today, you tomorrow." The worst thing about the experience that we are collectively experiencing is that there are far too many of us who don't believe that it will happen to them. Fortunately, when they become a part of the choir, it becomes too late. And so I'm disturbed about anybody who looks like me giving support when we look at the landscape of what's happening in America and sometimes even in the world. We're the ones that are being pushed to the margins. We are the ones that the 13th Amendment is saying that they will turn back into a state of slavery. We are under attack, and a person's past performance will predict what they will do in the future. We've seen already what the past 4 years is like. People keep saying that it's about left wing, right wing, but the reality is that systemically, America is operating exactly as it was envisioned. Mm-hmm. I used to say that it was alive and well, but it's alive and sick. And we are the ones that are collectively catching a cold.
Mm-hmm. I'd like to add, just to jog our collective memory here, Yusef and I both grew up in New York City, of course. And if we remember the climate of the 80s, sort of like Wall Street ran the town, basically. And with hip hop, there was two factions, two dichotomies. When Yusef and I first started thinking about the book, Yusef mentioned what kind of kid he was in 1989, and he said he was all about black medallion, no gold. And this was something we used to say in hip hop, the idea that we wore the leather medallions with the Africa symbol in the middle as opposed to the gold rope chains. And you had conscious hip hop and you had materialistic hip hop. And we identified with more conscious hip hop like KRS-One and Public Enemy and the like. And I won't list the materialistic hip hop, but I know you remember this, Yusef, where young Donald Trump was in some hip hop music videos back then. And he was revered by quite a few hip hop artists, rappers who wanted to be moguls in the same way that Donald Trump was a mogul in New York City. And it was part of the materialism that was so prevalent at the time. So Donald Trump represented the ideal of the American dream in the minds of a lot of the young people who were like us. And if we think about the crack epidemic and just the overall disenfranchisement in New York City in the 1970s, young people wanted to rise out of the ashes of poverty. And Donald Trump represented that king, that mogul that they wanted to be, even though he was a white man. He was still racist, but that didn't matter in comparison to the sort of wealth he was able to accumulate.
Yeah, that's why I always say, to quote Angela Davis, that racism and capitalism, it is so intertwined. It's so interconnected. It's going to be hard to dismantle racism without dismantling capitalism. And Donald Trump is like the epitome of a capitalist, right? He's the epitome of exploitation. Dr. Salaam, you of course. I'm sorry, were you going to say something?
I actually was. When you mentioned Angela Davis, I'm so happy that you mentioned Dr. Angela Davis because, one of the things that she said too, I never forget. She said, "We as a people have historical amnesia." Yes. And I've never asked her what she meant in terms of whether we chose that for ourselves or whether that was something that was that's the way that we've been socialized. And then when I think about those words from my hero Malcolm X, also known as El Haj Malik Shabazz, I've quickly realized that he used to say all the time, history is our best teacher, right? Yeah. And when we look at all of the things that have been going on, we already know. We want to believe that we don't. We want to believe that, something else is going to, but we already know. History is our best teacher. So historically, how have we been as we collectively take our temperature, right? We just experienced the March on Washington 57 years after the late, great Dr. King, who was assassinated.
Yes.
Who marched on Washington 57 years prior. 100 years prior to that was the signing and the ratification of the Emancipation Proclamation. And we were still fighting for jobs and freedom. And we're still fighting for jobs and freedom. And we're still fighting for the recognition that our life matters because overwhelmingly, as I said before, as the country and as the world has a front row seat to oppression, it's clear that our life does not matter.
It's interesting, too. The other narrative that I hear is, well, I'm just not going to vote because Joe Biden did the crime reform bill in 1994, and I'm not going to vote. And I don't like Kamala Harris because she's a prosecutor. I'm not going to vote. So there's this other narrative where there are some folks who are voting for Trump, and there are some folks who are just not going to show up at the polls because they feel like they're all out to get me. Nothing is going to work. Now, I said you got to vote in every election. It can't just be the presidential election. But Dr. Salaam, what are your response to that? Do folks who just they put Joe Biden in a similar category and Senator Harris?
I want us to first understand and reconcile with the fact that we are in a system called America. And that system that utilizes voting. We could imagine that it happens a different way, but unfortunately, that is our reality. The worst thing that we have to understand is that as people of color or as people who have been marginalized, they bet on us not participating so much so that even in school systems, they predict how many jails they need to build based on the 4th and 5th grade reading and math levels and really the scores based on that. Something happens at that time that begins to tell young people, especially young poor people and people of color, that they are not worthy, that they are worthless. And they begin to move throughout their lives as if they're a mistake. Imagine this. In the history of voting, there has never been 100% participation. Mm-hmm. There's been a concerted effort for the people who have been relegated to the second-class citizenry because of the criminal system of injustice, that they will never participate in their own freedom, justice, and equality through the voting process. And so I want us to understand that. For people who say, I'm not going to vote because they steal your vote, or there's no real good candidates, or whatever the excuse is, non-participation is participation. The system will continue without you, and your non-vote is a vote for whatever we get.
And you know, in 1868, we had 80% of black men registered to vote. In 1868. Can't we do like 70% in 2020? So thank you for that knowledge. Thank you. Evie, before we go, and then I'll go back to Dr. Salaam, just give us some closing thoughts on why it's important for folks to check out and support a book like Punching the Air.
Well, Punching the Air is not just about juvenile justice. It's not just about a racial incident or just inspired by Yusef's experiences. It is about the power of art, the redemptive power of art. No matter how many conversations we have about all the social justice issues, it's not going to change right now or tomorrow. We are simply having those conversations, and there are certainly people who are working toward that change. So what do we say to the young people who are incarcerated right now, even if they're not incarcerated? What do we tell them about job security in the future, or the state of their schools? We're in the middle of a pandemic. Their parents may have lost their jobs. Their communities seem to be falling apart. What do we give them right now to cope? And this is just one book that'll instill a sense of not just hope, but instill a sense that whatever it is that they create has the power to heal them and change them too, whether it be a TikTok video, some poetry, some rhymes, a drawing in a notebook, just how they put their outfits together, a dance. All of this is part of the creative process that is healing, and it lets them know that they are here and they can do something with their time and with their talent.
Dr. Salaam, we have to go soon. I want to give you the final comment, but I do want to say this to you. I've been looking forward to this interview. You're a warrior, you're a survivor, and I'm sure you get this all the time, but you've inspired so many people, and I'm just so happy you took the time to speak to me, because your story is so important, from the Scottsboro Boys to stories that we may not even know before that. So I just want to say, just thank you, brother, for being who you are, and you inspire a lot of people, including myself. But give us the final word on Punching the Air.
Punching the Air is really a love offering that both Evie and I have created. And I got the awesome opportunity to work with Evie on this book. I mean, it's an amazing book. It's creative. It's brilliant. It's beautiful. They say you shouldn't judge a book by its cover, but in this case, it's like it's in there. It's like ragu. This book, over everything else, my hope is that this book becomes the water to fuel the hope inside of all of us. We have to be able to tap into our greatness, and we have to be able to show the world who we are, right? Show them who you are, in the words of the Black Panther, right? We have to be able to show the world who we are. We have to be able to tell the world that we worked and we grinded and we put our shoulders down